This is Sporting Life.
Hello and welcome along to the Sporting Life Racing Podcast. This week we have Ben Linfoot, David Johnson, Billy Nash and Ed Chamberlin to pour over the events of the last 7 days. And we'll look ahead too with Sandown's final jumps fixture of the season coming up this Saturday. In fact, that's where we're going to start, in a refreshing twist to the schedule. And Ed, there's going to be a familiar feel to the ITV coverage, no doubt, this weekend. Willie Mullins, the star of the show again, as he looks to wrap up the first British trainer's title of his quite remarkable career, let's be honest. Is there one last push in you, Ed, or with this story, or has it sort of just become a little bit monotonous at this stage of the year, do you think?
No, it's not monotonous at all. I mean, we've got to bask in the glory of, we're seeing something outrageous now in terms of its quality. I mean, what he is doing is simply ridiculous. To do what he did at Cheltenham, crowning it with a Gold Cup win, to win a Grand National and then win a Scottish National like he did, is just phenomenal, really. And I hold my hand up. I certainly never heard of McDermott before he suddenly was that anti-post plunge. And then the SPs were bonkers. So I think this weekend, you've just got to take your hat off to the man. I mean, it is just incredible what we're witnessing. And I think Saturday, weather permitting, will be a lot of fun, really, with Patrick Wadge. I would imagine Harry Cobden, that's got a little bit tighter than it was to celebrate. And it's always a really good day. So I'm looking forward to it. So no need for a last push, Matt. I think it's going to be a really good day.
And some genuine stars of the season, I suppose, as well, lining up again. And the last big clash, really, would be El Fabiolo against John Bon in this celebration chase. It really does stand out, doesn't it? I'm assuming, Billy, that we're looking at maybe Gaelic Warrior staying at home for, what's that, the 2 mile novice. I don't think he's in like the big one at Punchestown, but El Fabiolo basically confirmed for this. I have been wrong before, obviously. Billy, John Bon is back at 2 miles. Is that a negative for him?
I think, Matt, all things being equal, I think El Fabiolo is probably a better 2 mile chaser than John Bon. We saw John Bon was very impressive at Aintree, but I think the step up and trip really suited him. Obviously, El Fabiolo has the question mark hanging over him after Cheltenham. His jumping again let him down on that occasion. But if they have him back on track, and Sandown is going to be a different test for him, how he's going to handle the railway fences will be interesting. But I think he's a better 2 mile chaser than John Bon. As you say, they have confirmed him for this race. It looks fairly certain he's going to run. So, yeah, he's certainly the one to beat. I think he's about 6 pounds clear on time form rating. So it should be a great clash. Hopefully we'll get it. And I'd be in the El Fabiolo camp for this particular race. I think this is Willie's probably best chance of the whole day, really.
David, it's interesting hearing Billy sort of say that, because punters brushed aside those fears, didn't they, at Cheltenham? Everyone was talking about them. That jumping, he's prone to clobber the odd fence. Obviously, he hit the first and then effectively came down at the fifth, pulled up in the Queen Mother Champion Chase. He went off 2-9 favourite at Cheltenham, but he's going to be a short price again today. Which side do you want to err on here?
I can't imagine I'll be backing him, but you would expect him to be able to take care of these at his best, wouldn't you? But I mean, must point out what a good race this is looking like it's shaping up to be. Obviously, the champion chase itself ended up a real damp squib, but the horses that are in here, obviously we've talked about El Fabiolo and John Bon. And the head-to-head that has been delayed all season, that looks like it's finally going to come off. But, they're not the only ones in there. Captain Guinness obviously took advantage of everybody running below form in the Queen Mother Champion Chase. But we've got Edward Stone in there, obviously. And it just looks like it's going to be run a real hell for leather gallop, doesn't it? Edward Stone obviously likes to go from the front these days. I don't know whether Dysart Dynamo will go there or not, but he'd be one that is a really interesting runner. I think, if he gets into a good rhythm over the railway fences, this season has been an absolute disaster for him. But if he got into a rhythm, I could see him taking a fair bit of catching on good ground. For all, he's obviously going to go off a pretty big price. But yeah, I mean, I'm very much in flat mode now, but I will make an exception to make sure I tune into this race on Saturday.
Well, that's it. We're going to be sort of darting around all, for the next couple of weeks, and certainly in this podcast, looking back and looking ahead, flat and jump. Scoop, whilst on John Bon, El Fabiolo, which side are you coming down on this clash? Not only that, just some thoughts as well on this Oaksy chase, Ahoy Senor maybe getting his day in the sun. I presume he's going to turn out again this weekend. Lucinda Russell was quite pleased with the run at Aintree. It was hilarious. Graham Cunningham of this parish shouting at the screen in the press room at Aintree about the cement-footed Ahoy Senor after he pinged the last at Aintree. It was quite remarkable, to be honest. But yeah, thoughts on John Bon here, down in trip for Henderson, trying to sort of spoil the party, and Ahoy Senor as well, maybe is in the Oaksy.
Yeah, well, I can echo what the lads have said because it's a fantastic race, the Celebration Chase. I mean, it was funny how this race came about, wasn't it? On the back of foot and mouth at Cheltenham, and we needed a champion chase at the end of 2001, and it's blossomed since then. And since it's become a Grade One, we have attracted the best horses to this race, and it does feel like an end of season celebration. And what better way to celebrate the jump season than 2 miles around Sandown with these chases, and it looks like they're being rewarded again this season. I wouldn't rule out John Bon back at 2 miles. He obviously was very impressive in the race last year as a novice, but like everyone else, I do think El Fabiolo is a better horse at 2 miles, and that ultimately, if he's at his best, he wasn't at Cheltenham. If he's at his best, he should win this. The Oaksy chase. Yeah, I mean, Ahoy Senor is a funny horse, isn't he? And this is a bit of a funny race.
Yeah, it's one for the sort of nearly horses, isn't it? Over the years, we had Nora win it, 3 or 4 times initially. That kind of says it all. And then we had like Black Corton and horses like that.
Absolutely. So just short of Grade One class, perhaps, and just short of, it's just short of 3 miles, isn't it? 2 miles 6 and a bit. And Ahoy Senor, he looked back to form. He looked as good as ever, really, over fences, didn't he? Last time at Aintree. So he's probably the one to beat, but could you ever back Ahoy Senor at 7-2 in any race, really? He's not for me.
I've got one for the Oaksy chase, Matt, that I quite fancy.
It's not the Willie Mullins horse on an 8-timer that no one's talking about, is it?
Please say Jungle Boogie. Please say Jungle Boogie, Billy.
You have the right stable, Ed, but maybe not the right horse.
Journey with Me.
Yeah, I'm really sweet on Journey with Me if he runs here. You hit the nail on the head, Matt. Nearly horse, and Journey with Me is a nearly horse. I don't think he's ever really fulfilled his potential, but I thought he was very impressive at Fairyhouse on his recent, his second run back after another break. Darragh O'Keefe got a great tune out of him that day. I wonder if he'll keep the ride. I'd say he might. But I think the trip, the drying ground, I think everything in his favour. He's a fresh horse and he's relatively unexposed over fences, which is something you can't say about the vast majority of these here. So I think he's got loads in his favour. If he turns up on Saturday, I'll certainly be in his corner.
And just on the Oaksy chase, while we're talking about it, we've seen Willie Mullins credit David Casey with entering everything from the yard. Well, what about Backerson, who's not been seen for over a year, 13 years of age, Billy?
I think they've pulled him out of retirement just for this weekend, Scoop, to be honest. Yeah, he's won his last 5, 6, 7 races in a row. They've kind of cherry-picked his races in the last couple of seasons. They've kept him to I suppose, lesser company grade races and all that. And he's been fantastically consistent. But, I mean, this is a huge ask for him. You couldn't see him winning this at the ripe old age of 13.
I think they put him in the hurdle as well. Is that right? The Bet365 Select Hurdle. Now, on that race, we are expecting Impere Passer here again, I think, are we, Bill? Obviously, Langerdan rematch, maybe. I'm not totally sure on running plans, but we've got, obviously, Sir Gerard in there as well. Another potentially good little race on the final day.
Yeah, I don't know what the running plans for this race are, Matt. I'm not sure if Impere Pass and Langerdan round 2 is on the cards. Hopefully it is. It'd be great for us if it is. But Sir Gerhard is one that I'd be really interested in here. Obviously, he kind of fluffed his lines a bit at the Cheltenham Festival, but I don't think he's ever proved that he stays 3 miles. I think that's his big issue. And this is going to be his first try at an intermediate trip over hurdles since he won the Ballymore all those years ago. So I think, he's had a little confidence booster back in Cork since. Again, obviously, if Impere Pass or Langerdan runs, he's going to be up against it. But I certainly wouldn't put anyone off Sir Gerhard. If the big 2 come out, I think he might be the one to beat here.
And Skelton's seen Mullins' Bacasson and raised him a My Drogo just out of the back pocket there. Could be quite amusing. And Sa Majeste, Billy, just to sign off, what a way to end the season that'll be for Willie in the 2 mile 4 handicap hurdle at the end of the day. Sa Majeste, the big talking horse from earlier in the season. Yeah,
the big talking horse, and things just didn't go his way at all at Cheltenham for whatever reason. Obviously, he was backed off the boards and he never really looked like getting competitive in that race. I certainly haven't lost faith in him. Whether he's the drying ground is a little bit of an unknown to us. He hasn't raced on it that much. But again, it's hard to know what Willie's going to do here. I think he's got 4 in the race. Castle de Mott is a horse that we kind of keep on making excuses for, but he's not one that I'd rule out here, Matt. Nothing went right from at Aintree. I'd certainly put a line through that run. And, they were really sweet on him going to Aintree. So he'd one that would have a big chance, I think, if he turns up. I'd say he'd be a possibility here. But yeah, again, we'll just have to wait and see what actually runs in this race.
That's it. Now we're only going off the 5-day entries in the Bet365 Gold Cup 2, but the market, seemingly spoken with Kitty's Light, looks like he'll be back out just a fortnight on from that fantastic run in the Grand National. What a little horse he is! That campaign last year, winning the Ida Chase, Scottish National, and this Bet365 Gold Cup really will live on. It might not be repeated, David, for too long. It seems to be that he's the horse to beat. He's not on drying ground, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. And, a horse that had done as well as what he did in the Grand National, under normal circumstances, you might be worried about him turning out quickly. But obviously, we know that he's been campaigned with the spring in mind. And, he turned out off a even quicker absence in the race last year, didn't he? Coming here straight from the Scottish National. So, the way that he went through the race in the Grand National, you wouldn't be worried about him. I think coming back to this sort of ground, he just didn't quite get home in a soft ground Grand National, did he? The good ground here will be right in his favour, and be amazed if he's not sort of bang there turning for home.
Scoop, anything stand out for you in the big handicap? I know the punting pointers guys, David Massey and Rory Delaghi, they've been on Lamilos for a couple of weeks, and I think, as Andy Asquith put it, doubled down in the Weekend View column on Monday as well. I see the case for him. 149 over fences is his mark. That's no gimme, is it?
It's not, and he was well punted, wasn't he, at Cheltenham over hurdles in the Pertemps, and you'd have to be a little bit disappointed with that effort. But we know this horse on his day is very good and probably capable of a mark in the high 140s, and it looks like the ground is in his favour, so you can see why he's got support. I look at the race, and I mean, we saw at the Scottish National meeting, didn't we, how novices at this time of year can just be a little bit too well handicapped for old and more exposed horses. And you look at a horse like Nick Rocket for Willie Mullins, he didn't jump too well, I didn't think, in the Irish Grand National when sent off favourite. But I just wonder if he might jump better on better ground, and he would be one of those unexposed novices off a mark in the 140s who could be a bit better. So I'd be sort of swaying towards that sort of horse, I think.
That's it. We've seen the novices in the Irish Grand National, obviously our Grand National, and then the Scottish Grand National. Yeah, it seems to be the theme. Billy, just before we move on, let's not forget, obviously, it's the Punchestown Festival. That'll be underway by the time we get round to recording next week. We roughly know the makeup of the Ladbrokes Punchestown Gold Cup. Am I right in thinking a rematch between Gallop and Deschamps and Fast or Slow?
Looks like it's on the cards, Matt. Yeah, both of them are certainly heading in that direction by the looks of things. So, yeah, it should be a cracking race again, all going well. The ground has finally started to dry up, but this is Ireland, so it could be heavy yet by the time Punchestown rolls around. But yeah, it does promise to be a cracking race again if the two of them take each other on once more.
Do you remember that year it was basically waterlogged, but they just ran in all the races anyway?
I remember standing in the car park for an hour and a half before it, John, wanting to know. They wouldn't let us in. There was a track inspection. Everyone was stood outside. The gates were closed. And I was stood in the rain. But, despite the fact that there was pools all over the place, racing went ahead, thankfully.
Ed, let's just talk about how we got here in this sort of current standings in the British title race, not Leicester hammering Southampton. Willie, he ran 6 in the Scottish National at Ayr. 2 of them basically disgraced themselves, but he ended up with the 1st, the 4th, 5th, and the 6th. This was Danny Mullins. You mentioned the horse drifting in the betting. It's such a weird situation, wasn't it? With so many people, maybe UK punters, barely knowing who this horse was until he was entered in the race.
Yeah, there were some strange SPs with the place horses as well, actually. I mean, that money for Mr. Vango, he was backed off the boards late. And it was funny because Willie Mullins didn't know where the winner's enclosure was at Ayr. I mean, he just, for all his brilliance, he manages to charm everybody. He just engaged with everybody. Patrick was exactly the same. And then Patrick was off to Wembley at the weekend. They're just an extraordinary family, really. And I did enjoy the victory for a number of reasons. Largely the winning owner, Pat Gallagher, is a great supporter and a great man, really. I host the Peter O'Sullivan lunch where he's a big supporter, incredibly generous. And, you know, he's one of those people you wouldn't know what he does. For example, the way he looked after the Moore family when Josh had that horrendous fall. I mean, he's just a classy guy, and it was great to see him have a winner. He's very understated, is Pat. So that was a really nice thing about the winner. And look at Sharjah. I mean, honestly, it was just remarkable. I mean, he was so much the best horse in that race. But just the genius of Willie Mullins, just, you know, it's just mind-blowing at times. But he went there, and I think Scotland slightly fell in love with him. And that's part of his armoury is his PR and his charm. I mean, people want to have horses with him as well as win with him. It's quite a skill.
And you must have spared a thought, obviously, for Toby Laws and connections of Surrey.
And Surrey Racing. I mean, it really was David against Goliath, wasn't it? And he went 1-2 straight away, and then drifted as time went on for that photograph. And I thought, crikey, we might have a dead heat here, but then they called it. And I felt very sorry for them, because that would have been huge for the yard, huge for the owners, but they could have a Grand National horse on their hands, so maybe they'll have the last lot.
It'd have been huge for Skelton as well, wouldn't it, if that swung the other way around? And then obviously, if you look back at the steward's inquiry, if you reverse both of those, he's probably still.
It was so funny being there for so many different reasons. All of them playing it down, Paul Nicholls playing it down, Skelton playing it down to a certain degree, and yet all of them, after each race, coming over, what's the score? Get your calculator out. And we were struggling, to be honest, because you had to calculate all the places as well. So it was actually way beyond my mathematical skills. But all of them were bang in tune with it. And then a little bit of an anticlimax with it virtually done and dusted, because this week could have been a bit more fun. Though it hasn't stopped Willie going to all sorts of places. Foss Lass, Perth today. And he's leaving no stone unturned at the weekend. But if it's in the bag, might those plans change? I don't know. I hope not, because I really want to see some of these clashes.
Billy, what now for Mr. Incredible?
That is the $64,000 question, Matt. He's in the Bet365 Gold Cup at the weekend. Maybe they'll turn him out again. I don't know. Yeah, he let himself down badly at Aintree, or at Ayr, I should say. So yeah, I don't know what they'll do with him next now.
Screams cross country to me. Get him over the hedges.
Paul Byrne said, didn't he, recently, that, you know, to Nick Luck on the podcast, he said he was sort of unsellable, this horse, because he was talking about obviously JP McManus Bay and a load of the others. And I thought at the time it was like, you know, he's got such a close affinity with Mr. Incredible, but I think he's very much just unsellable. He's quite literally unsellable. But no, it was a fantastic meeting. And obviously, Scoop, favour and fortune. Let's just touch on the Scottish champion hurdle. I know it's only a handicap, but he got his big day, something you predicted in your weekend column. Am I right in thinking he's only gone up £3 for it as well?
He has, yeah. I saw that this morning. It looks fairly generous, doesn't it? Another novice on the up, and I think Timeform described the hurdles track as good to soft, didn't they, David, after this race? And I think drying ground was important to this horse. He's done well throughout the winter, and he's come out of that Sky Bet Supreme, which is looking pretty good form now. A nod to Slade Steele ahead of Punchestown next week, perhaps. And yeah, he did it nicely. I did think when Bialystock came with his run for Willie Mullins and Rich Ritchie after the last, he might just nab him. But to be fair to Alan King's horse, he pulled out more, and it sounds like he's staying over hurdles for another season. Crack at the Great Wood, the Betfair Hurdle, those type of races. But his long-term future very much looks like being a nice novice chaser to me.
And of a similar mould, Bill, Key de Bourbon. He did what he needed to do, didn't he, in the novice hurdle? But it's obviously must be nice to end his season seemingly on a high note.
Yeah, he was entitled to win that race, Matt. He won it nicely. I'm not sure his season is over, because he's entered in a handful of Grade 1s at Punchestown, and he didn't have a particularly hard race at the weekend, so I wouldn't be at all surprised to see him out again. And I think that could be a common theme with a lot of the Willie horses that he sent to Britain this week. The likes of Rathgall Boy that won at Foss Lass the other day. You know, he won very easily. I wouldn't be at all surprised to see a couple of them turn out again at Punchestown in a couple of weeks' time.
Okay, while we're looking back, let's just switch codes and touch on the classic trials from the last week as well. I mean, it is spring after all, David. You said you're in flat mode, although I'm sort of obliged to call them so-called flat trials, really, because given the way that things have worked out in recent seasons, David, you just hear these glowing reports, not only around City of Troy, but obviously we've heard Rosalian working the house down, positives for Ghostwriter, Task Force. The other one was Al Yanabi, was it? I think. I mean, would you be surprised if Hartem, the Craven winner, could even be competitive in a Guineas?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It came as a bit of a shock, didn't it? That Hartem was able to build on his 2-year-old form to the extent that it looked like he did in the Craven. And, obviously we know how far and how many times he was behind City of Troy last year. So it does take a leap of faith to think that he could be a Guineas winner in a couple of weeks' time. But obviously he's in the same stable as Rosalian, and I'm sure connections there will be taking that as a positive. And it's just quite funny, they were talking about these performances at the Craven meeting, and it's almost as though if there were any classic winners there, they were probably the ones that were working before the racing, wasn't they? Carl Burke sent quite a battalion down there. That talking horse off the all-weather, whose name escapes me, he seemed to work really well.
He'd be one I'd be a bit negative on, DJ Night Ray.
Okay.
He was very, very inexperienced in the paddock beforehand. And there was no one there. I mean, there was literally no one there. I just worry about him with a crowd there in a week or so's time, pre-race. He worked nicely. It was just the bit beforehand, because I was actually doing a rehearsal in the paddock while he was in there, and he was very, very inexperienced, which would concern me. She was fantastic, Fallen Angel, before, during, and after.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously we had the Nell Gwyn there as well, didn't we? Pretty Crystal, she came out and stepped up a fair bit on anything she'd done as a 2-year-old. She doesn't currently hold an entry in a Guineas. I don't know whether I'd be necessarily encouraging the owners to splash out the supplementary fee, given what she'd probably have to find to win a typical race. But she's obviously trained on well from 2 to 3. And I mean, they were quite interesting races, weren't they, on the whole, all 3 days at Newmarket? There's bits and bobs to take out, but classic trials probably are not going to live up to the name, are they?
Scoop, just sticking with Pretty Crystal, she's a filly that I know Richard Fahey had fairly high opinion of throughout last season. It did come at my cost when I think I backed her for the Albany and the Prestige and that race at Ayr at the end of the season. But where can you see her slotting into sort of the classic, her classic campaign?
Yeah, I think she probably deserves a shot at the Guineas. It doesn't look like an absolutely vintage 1,000 Guineas. You've got a huge behemoth hanging over the anti-post market in the 2,000 in City of Troy, but it doesn't look quite like that in the 1,000. And I thought she showed that she trained on, that she's got a good attitude. She knuckled down and beat the previous Guineas favourite in Dan Sequence quite nicely. I thought she handled the dip well. And yeah, I mean, if it was me trying to find the supplementary cash, I don't think I'd be getting the loans out to stump up. But I think Sheikh Rashid will be okay. And I think she deserves a go at the race. I know people have talked about Richard Fahey's previous winners of the Nell Gwyn running in the 1,000 Guineas and finishing 4th and 6th, and that's probably all she can hope for. But I think she might do a little bit better than that, even though she's 14-1 chance in the market. That's probably about right, isn't it?
David, just sticking with Newmarket, it's not only this time of year, but bit of a front runner's paradise. Is that fair to say? Is that just a fact of life at this track at this time of year? Just something we should be well used to now?
Yeah, it certainly was, wasn't it? I think often the races do pan out to suit the front runners there, but I think it was worse this time around because there was a pretty significant tailwind, wasn't there? I think it sort of got lesser as the meeting went on throughout the 3 days, but it was still, I mean, it was hugely impacting the times on the first day, and then it was obviously a pattern that did carry on throughout the week. So it is always something that you want to make sure you are aware of, and always be, as we call it, always check out the wind form at Newmarket, definitely.
Well, that's it. I was going to say a race like the Abernant Stakes, would you be taking that with a bit of a pinch of salt? I know Washington Heights was one of the outsiders of the race, but he beat good horses with good form from last year, Millstream and Spycatcher, and he's all speed, isn't he? I suppose that was favoured on the day, but how do you reflect on the Abernant? Yeah,
I think he was just glad that Quinault was having a day off, wasn't he? You think how many times he had to run up against him, and obviously Millstream, his form features in really well with those competitive 3-year-old handicaps from last year. And you can't take anything away from Washington Heights on the day. You still got to go there and do it, and it's not necessarily the easiest to assess because he won a listed race on his final start last year out in Scandinavia by 5 lengths. So that, in hindsight, perhaps didn't get the credit that he deserved for that. And this suggests that he's going to have to be worth his place in these group races now. I think he holds an entry in the Duke of York, doesn't he? York is another race that has something of a reputation for suiting front runners. It's obviously a flat track. He's already shown that he can run well there when he was just touched off by Quinault in that the Charity Day sprint there, didn't he? So, you don't want to be knocking him. He's a 4-year-old. He's not had a lot of racing. He's got the physique to carry on training well. So, a lot of these older horses, they are there to be shot at. They don't set an exacting standard, and he's clearly raised his game since last year.
Let's roll on to Newbury. The 2 days there, starting with Friday, treble for Richard Hannon, who started the season absolutely on fire. He had Hawaiian, Voyage and Star Style. Now, Voyage, Ed, this is a colt in the Derby. It sounds like owner Julie Wood, real character, and had your horses with Hannon's for many years now. She's keen to give it a whirl at Epsom.
She had a good couple of days, didn't she? She really did, which is nice to see. And Jason Weaver was strangely keen on this horse beforehand. I couldn't see it at all, and went off a crazy price, really. What was he, about 28 to 1 or something?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But I think it'll be a runner. One, because he's trained by Hannon, and 2, because of Julie's desire to have one in the race. But I'd be amazed if others didn't progress past him.
And one of the most impressive scoop on the day was that Star Style. She won the 7 furlong fillies maiden. She won by 5 and a bit lengths from the front. She's now 20 to 1 for the Guineas. Another one in the mix, arguably winning the fillies maiden. It's probably more impressive than what some of the trial winners have been doing.
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. We've just discussed how the 1,000 Guineas is perhaps a little bit more wide open, and this filly absolutely deserves a shot, you would think. I mean, I think I'm right in saying, David, it came out well on the times, didn't it, this race, relative to the other races on the card, and she was just so impressive. Travelled powerfully up front, quickened away. There was nothing not to like. It was a really good performance, and I think she's 25 to 1 for the 1,000 Guineas, and I think she'll be on plenty of punters' radar at that sort of price each way.
There was a nice sprint handicap on the card as well, David. That was won by Wiltshire. I think starting out for William Haggis, left Martin and Freddie Mead. Ed, what's the latest on the Meads? They've only got like a couple of horses registered on the BHA, I believe. Is there anything official yet?
No, there's nothing official. The vibe is that they are going to start again, but in a limited capacity, I think. It's a strange one, isn't it, really? Because they own most of Manton as well.
Yeah, definitely. That Wiltshire, David, he ran in the Greenham last year, and now looks like a proper one for the sprint handicaps. He's won this off 95, only gone up a couple of pounds.
Yeah, it was really impressive as well. He's won by a head. That doesn't come close to telling the full story. He's extremely easy to back as well, which looks interesting all the more so when you see how he won, because he's tanked through the race, looked full of running at all stages, really. But Tom Marquand had to sort of weave his way through, and unfortunately for me, having back chairman of the board, he did manage to get out just in time. So, but yeah, Wiltshire, like you say, he's only gone up a couple of pounds. So that sort of makes it quite interesting, because he's entered at Newmarket on Guineas Day, where he'd have to carry a penalty. But that penalty would obviously take him higher than what his new mark is. So whether William Haggis will choose to wait a little bit longer, but Wiltshire is definitely the kind of horse that you could see turning up in races like a Wokingham or a Stewards Cup, Air Gold Cup, that kind of thing at some stage further down the line, definitely.
Absolutely. And the Greenham card scoop, there was the biggie on the flat on Saturday, Esquire the Gelding. It sounds a bit like a Game of Thrones character, doesn't it? He won for David O'Mara, beating El Bodon. No classic clues here, maybe, but I suppose the only surprise was that the well-back Hannon colt, Sun, only managed to finish 4th.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't a bad run from Sun, but he was backed in from 25-1, I think, into 9-2 and finished a close up fourth. I was charged with writing an article for Sporting Life on Saturday. Find something from the classic trails was the brief, and there was very little to find really. I mean, obviously, Esquire
The
the
hospital
gelding.
pass, wasn't it? That
It really was. It really was, and a gelding winning the Greenham, it's not going to tell you an awful lot. It was probably a below par renewal, shall we say. I thought Mr. Sketch was probably one to take out of the race if you were really digging for clues for the future. He was short of room a couple of times. I thought he trained on. I think when he gets a bit softer ground, he might be one to look out for. And the Fred Darling, nice result, obviously, for Marco Botti and Folgaria, but we've seen the Gosden horses come out this spring, and they've not. They've looked like they've needed a run. And I thought Regal Jubilee ran a perfectly sound race in second with a view to her long-term campaign. She's in the Guineas. I'm looking forward to when she steps up in trip, judging by breeding.
I was quite impressed with Amalka from the Fred Darling. Only had the one run coming into this off the all-weather that didn't really amount to much. The horse that she beat was well beaten at the Craven meeting earlier in the week, but Amalka did really well, I thought, to only be beaten 2 necks. I think if James Doyle rode the race again, he'd probably want another go at it. We've seen sort of Folgaria. She came from right out the back and got first run, whereas Amalka was just sort of forced to sit and suffer a little bit before, once she's got in the clear, she's flown home. And, the pedigree is absolutely there. She's by Kingman. She's a half-sister to Ben Battle. So... and I think she's been knocked out to 33s for the Guineas, and is obviously a case that it might come too soon and they decide not to go there. But as we've already said, this doesn't look a good 1,000 Guineas. If Amelka got there, I think she'd be an interesting runner at 25, something like that. So I'll be keeping her in my sights, definitely.
Interesting stuff. And the winner, I believe, goes for the French Guineas by all accounts. Billy's still there, right? It's not Billy's Wi-Fi hasn't dropped off. I just haven't spoke about Irish horses for ages, which sounds. I do apologise, Billy. The Curragh at the weekend was obviously some good racing. It was good to see the White Birch back, the Derby third from last year. He was back with a bang as well in the Group 3 alleged stakes. He's always going to be quite striking, this horse, isn't he? Because he's a good-looking grey. But from what I heard beforehand going into it, it sounded like White Birch was in need of a run. This must have come as a real bonus for his trainer and connections.
I'm not so sure about that, Matt. He's a horse that won first time out last year, so he obviously runs well fresh, and it was quite a taking performance by White Birch. He ran to a time form rating of 116 when he finished third in the Derby last year. He wasn't a million miles off that this year, only a couple of pounds on our ratings. And I think he's a horse that might even do better as a 4-year-old. By all accounts, he was pretty well behaved in the preliminaries and things, which has been a bit of an Achilles heel of White Birch's in the past. So maybe he's just matured a little bit. I thought it was a really nice starting point for him. The Tattersalls Gold Cup is an obvious race if they want to go back up to Group 1 company. Now, he might fall a little bit short of Group 1 company, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if they had a crack at the Coronation Cup with him. Obviously he ran so well at Epsom last year. I think that's a race where he could do well. But it's probably form to keep a close eye on. There was 2 progressive fillies finished second and third to him, Maxux of Joseph O'Brien's and Village Voice of Jessica Harrington's. The 2 of them will pay their way, certainly in fillies and mares races throughout the season. And a couple further back, the likes of Raise You and Crypto Force were returning from big breaks, and both of them shaped well to a degree. Raise You didn't get a clear run when he needed it, but he wants to go further anyway, so I'm sure they'll have been delighted with that. And Crypto Force just ran like a horse that's been off the track for a while. He was very gassy and very fresh up front. Was still in front until maybe a furlong down, so I think they'll be happy enough with that, and he can build on that too. So all in all, a race to keep a close eye on, I think, Matt.
And can we stick with you, Billy, for a line on the 2 nice 2-year-olds for Joseph O'Brien? That was on the same card, wasn't it? Midnight Strike. Sorry, this was on the Sunday. Midnight Strike.
On the Sunday, yeah.
Coward of the County. I'm sure Scoop will give us a rendition of Kenny Rogers' classic after we've stopped recording, but he beat the well-touted Whistle Jacket from Ballydoyle, and he beat him in good style.
Yeah, I think of the 2 races, that was probably the deeper one. Kind of a carbon copy, Joseph beating Aidan in both of them. Midnight Strike beat Treasure Island the first. They're probably two nice horses. But I think the second maiden, the first 6 furlong maiden this season in Ireland, is the one to concentrate on. Coward of the County beating Whistle Jacket, like you say. Graham North wrote about this in his Watch and Learn column this week. Interestingly, the time figures for 2-year-olds this year have been pretty moderate, to be honest. And Coward of the County has put up the best one so far. It's the only one plus 90, I think. Now, I stand corrected on that, but he ran to a time figure of 94, which for this time of the year is pretty good. He beat Whistle Jacket, who, interestingly, is the full brother to Little Big Bear, who also got beaten in this race first time out. And Whistle Jacket actually shaped quite similarly to how Little Big Bear had. You know, he was out in front, he tanked along through the race, looked like he was going to win, and probably got outstayed or maybe got a little bit tired in the closing stages. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if Whistle Jacket dropped back to 5 furlongs next time. But Coward of the County, as things stand, you'd have to think he's a Coventry horse. They'll be going down that route with him. They look like 2 really nice colts, and probably 2 to follow for certainly in the coming weeks.
One more to assess briefly, David, if you would. Bellum Justin won the Betfred Blue Ribbon Trial. That was on Tuesday. Andrew Balding and Kim Power teaming up again to good effect. Another potentially going the route of the Dante Stakes at York, following in the Prince of the Foxes for the same connections last year. Do we have confirmed time form numbers on this colt just yet?
Yeah, we do by the looks of it. It's got a rating of 105p, Defiance 104. We've actually got Chief Little Rock, who was in third, a little bit below his best. He's still rated 106, so above them. Not the first time that we've seen Aidan O'Brien's horses coming over here at this time of year and not quite coming up to scratch. And it's obviously run as a classic trial. It's a long time, if it ever has had a strong bearing on the Derby, this race.
85 years, David.
Is it? Yeah. So you could say we're due one, but I think Bellum Justin, you'd want to see him go and do a fair bit more in another trial before you could be suggesting that he's got realistic Derby claims. But he's well bred. He's going the right way. He's got experience of the track now. The way the race was run wasn't necessarily going to see him to maximum effect. I don't think they didn't go that quick. So. Connections will be pleased enough, but it's just one step on the ladder rather than him really throwing his hat into the ring at the moment, I don't think.
Balding then won with a horse called Portsmouth, just to sum up a bad day for Southampton fans. And he's a Southampton fan himself, Balding.
Is he?
But Billy, I want to ask you, and David mentioned it there, Chief Little Rock was very solid in the market yesterday, disappointing. At Newmarket, these Aidan O'Brien sighters didn't get within sight of the winner. Any concerns ahead of City of Troy next week?
Not particularly, Ed. We see this kind of every year with Aidan O'Brien. And I think the horses he sent, certainly last week and even Chief Little Rock yesterday, you'd have to say he was testing the water with these horses. These are not the top level O'Brien horses. I think he has much better ammunition at home, ready to fire. And his runners in Ireland have been a little bit up and down, but that happens every year this time of the year. Some of them will win, some of them will get beaten. But you can be sure come the big day, Aidan will have them spot on.
You've teed me up as well just to tap in my stat of the week, which was that Aidan, now let me get the facts straight. Aidan in Britain on turf since 1999, 82 runners, just 5 winners.
In the month of April.
Pretty damning. In the month of April, I knew I was going to leave one element of my very convoluted fact out of that.
Key element.
You're like the little backup when I miss the sitter and you just tap it in from a yard out. Beautiful. In the month of April. Well, I'll record that again.
I'm glad that the Guineas is heading into May.
Exactly.
It's the odd year that it's run on the 30th of April or something. So
those 3 days, 2 or 3 days are absolutely vital in my stats. Yeah. He'll be fine. Yeah, City of Troy will be absolutely fine, Ed. It does lead us on nicely to Sandown's flat card. This is obviously Aidan. I think he's declared Portland, just the one under Ryan Moore. That's in the Bet365 Classic trial itself. It's on ITV, Ed, isn't it? A card that's featured Pile Driver and Yabir and Adayar and Westover won it a couple of years ago. It was actually abandoned just last year due to the rain. So I think we're set fair for to go ahead despite a few showers in the forecast. Now, Desert Hero's back. He was kind of a big one for ITV, running in the St. Ledger in the King and Queen Silks last year. He's in the Gordon Richards Stakes.
Yeah, just that classic trial 3 years ago. First, Alenker, second, Adayar, third, Yabir, fourth, Lone Eagle. So that was a good renewal. Yeah, Desert Hero, great to see him back. Great to see him still in training. I'd be worried two things really with him, Matt, and why I wouldn't be going in at whatever price he is, 2-1. One, those Newmarket horses. I know Haggis won with Hamish at the weekend. Those Newmarket horses, that's been a theme, particularly at Newmarket last week. Plenty of them are well behind. The weather, not surprising, the weather's been horrendous there. And I just think with Desert Hero, Haggis will really take his time with this horse, because didn't they move the Melbourne Cup might be an option at the back end, and Haggis will take it slowly. So I just think, I know the others in the race have got question marks against the Misra and co, but I just don't think you could be that confident. It'll be fascinating to hear from Haggis ahead of Desert Hero at the weekend, because I would be amazed if he's tuned up for Friday.
That's the thing, isn't it? A horse that ended his season in the St. Ledger, the fact that he's starting out here over a 1.25 miles, it absolutely screams tune up for a decent 1.5 mile race next time, doesn't it?
Or beyond even that. Could be a cup horse.
And Scoop, just on the trial itself then, it's sort of an up and down spring so far for Charlie Appleby. Obviously a team, he's openly said he's hoping to sort of regroup after a bit of a miserable time of things last season. He's got Arabian Crown, a horse that was really going through the gears in his own time last season, ended up with a couple of wins in good company. I thought he might be one that would go to the Breeders' Cup. He doesn't, but he starts out here. It must be a vote of confidence that he's running him here.
Yeah, I think he's had this horse down as a Derby horse all along, hasn't he? And ran in the Zetland Stakes over 10 furlongs, which he absolutely bolted up in on his final start at 2. And he must be looking forward to getting this horse over 1.5 miles, because he does look all stamina, for all that he might do things in his own time in certain company. 10 furlongs in a classic trial on good ground at Sandown for his reappearance. It wouldn't be the biggest surprise to see him get beat in this and then come on for the run and run well in a Derby. We obviously saw Adayar was beaten in this and won the Derby, didn't he? And he might be that type of horse. So I would hold your bets on this one and see what he does on Friday.
And Portland, Billy, similar sort of warnings. He's actually had a run, hasn't he? He ran in March. He was second to Purple Lily, who is back out again potentially this weekend in the Salsaville.
That's correct, yeah. He'd be interested to know Portland. Again, he's not top of the tree in Ballydoyle, but like you said, he's had a run, so that should bring him on a ton, and it would certainly make him competitive in this field. I wouldn't normally expect him to beat the likes of an Arabian Crown, but if he's going to do it, this is probably the weekend to do it. But like you said, finished second to Purple Lily, who's a very progressive filly, is a Paddy Toomey's. She runs in the Salsaville at Navan on Saturday, and yeah, that's gearing up to be a decent race as well. It's a Group 3 this year, so yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how he gets on with a view to her running on Sunday, because I think she'll take a bit of beating.
And don't forget, it is still April, and it is O'Brien, and it is in Britain on the turf. We must move on and just touch on a couple of departing jockeys, a couple of riders who, well, I'm sure have touched us all of our sort of racing lives in one way or another. Firstly, Olivier Pellier, he's announced that he'll be retiring this week, 51 years old. He's bowing out at La Teste, I believe, on Thursday. That's tomorrow for us in the here and now. David, what's the real sort of standouts for you in terms of the career of Olivier Pellier?
Oh, there's so many that you could go through, isn't there? One of those riders that he was almost like a pioneer for the globalization of jockeys 20 years ago or so. Not only has he won virtually everything there is to win in France, I was looking through that record, 4 arcs, included 3 in a row in 96, 97 and 98. But, you see what else that he's done, not just in Europe, but I think he's won an EP Taylor in Canada, a load of Group 1s in Hong Kong. He's got a Japan Cup, numerous successes out in Dubai and Qatar, as well as, those Breeders' Cup successes out with the Goldikova. So, there isn't much left for him to win, but the one that sticks out for me, and I'm sure nobody will be surprised that knows me and Harbinger, is that King George performance. It still remains the best performance that I've seen by a horse that isn't called Frankel, and the way that he strode clear that day with Pellier in the plate will certainly be one that sticks in my memory. So yeah, wish him extremely well in his retirement.
That was the banker of the day, wasn't it, Billy?
Well, I was going to say I had the EP Taylor getting a mention, 150 to 1, but Harbinger was very short. Scoop Goldie Cover for me, I think. What about you for Pellier? He's been a class jockey, hasn't he?
Ah, superb. Yeah, I mean, Goldie Cover going back to back to back in 3 Breeders' Cups. I think that lit a fire in a lot of racing fans when it comes to going over stateside, and Pellier just had a great relationship with her. And British racing fans, he came over and won the Derby on High Rise, the Guineas on Cockney Rebel as well. Remember that one? So plenty of memories for flat fans with Pellier, and it's good that he's bowing out on his own terms at 51. He's been a fantastic jockey.
Yeah, and speaking of which, Ed, great to hear and to see Paddy Brennan also bowing out in one piece and on his own terms with a winner at Cheltenham as well. Surely sort of one of the most, like, how do we say it, intensely committed jockeys, is that fair to say, of his generation, which when it includes Walsh and McCoy and Fitzgerald, it's quite significant. A combustible character at times as well, though, Ed.
Yeah, I would say he and Olivier Pellier are absolute polar opposites, really.
There you go.
Pellier was all style with his butterfly brooch thing he wore, and just all self-deprecating charm.
The Blue Samurai, I think they called him in Japan.
Yeah, well, Paddy Brennan was combustible, wore his heart on his sleeve, spent a lot of time not speaking to ITV. But I always liked him. He was honest. He was controversial at times, but what a hard, brilliant jockey he has been. And you think back to Q Card's Imperial Commanders. I mean, that Q Card victory over Ruby at Kempton would probably be my favourite Paddy Brennan moment. It looked like Ruby and Vautour were home for all money, and Q Card and Paddy came and claimed him. What a brilliant career he had, and it was just great to see him with his family bowing out in his own fashion, and we'll miss him for a number of reasons. But he didn't speak to us very often, so won't miss the interviews.
I don't want to ask who he didn't like as such, but Billy, do you recall Vautour getting beat quite so fondly at Kempton?
Not particularly that one, but yeah, I mean, hats off to Paddy Brennan. He's had a tremendous career for a fella that I believe, Matt, had no real background in racing, so he just wanted to be a jockey. He, of course, came through the Jim Bolger Academy. But I was reading this morning, he's been in Britain. He moved over to Paul Nicholls' yard in 2000. So, I mean, that's 24 years is a long time to be a jump jockey. And hats off to him for all the success he's had and for longevity, if nothing else, because that's not easy to do. But there's a kind of a changing in the guard now in the weigh room in Britain, isn't there? I mean, you've lost Paddy Brennan, Aidan Coleman, Jamie Moore, I think, retired this year as well. So a lot of the elder statesmen are moving on.
I was just checking on the current standings. There is seven winners between Sean Bowen and Harry Cobden. So I suppose depending on what happens over the next day or two, we could be looking at an interesting final day on that score, Ed, as you mentioned. But Billy as well, we've got Paul Townend. Is he going to catch Jack Kennedy next week? I suspect. I mean, you couldn't really put a number on how many Willie Mullins is going to have at Punchestown, but Paul's going to have his fair share. And is he six behind Jack?
6 behind Jack after yesterday. Now, Paul is gone to Perth today to ride for Willie, where I'd be surprised if he doesn't have at least 2 winners. Jack Kennedy obviously has a pretty full book at Bellewstone, so he'd be hoping to add to his tally at Bellewstone. But I think he'll need to be at least 10 clear come Punchestown to beat Paul. You'd expect Paul could certainly ride a double every day at Punchestown. So you're talking 10 or 12 winners for Paul. So it's going to be difficult for Jack, but he's really putting it up to him. He's over 120 winners ridden now, and Paul is on 115, still all for Willie Mullins, yet to ride a winner for an outside trainer this season, which is incredible in its own right. But it's going to add a little bit of extra interest to Punchestown, because it will go right down to the wire, I think, now.
All right, I know we've sort of hammered this point before, and I don't want to labour the point too much, but it has now officially been confirmed that Cheltenham Racecourse are going to be making the changes to the festival. And we're talking about next year's festival, importantly. So that is good news. It's sticking at 28 races. Scoop, what do you see these changes being, and how far would you go if you were in charge of it?
I've no idea what the changes will be. I think what they have to do, in my opinion, is protect the crown jewels and look at increasing competitiveness in the absolute crown jewels of the meeting. And when I say crown jewels, I mean Champion Hurdle, Champion Chase, these races that have perhaps suffered a bit over the years because of the expansion of the meeting. Now there's a level of drasticness that you can go to, isn't there? I don't think they'll do this, but personally, I'd remove the mares races from the festival. That's what I'd do. I'd put those 3 races into the April meeting, make a big thing of it, have a mares day. I think the mares programme's been brilliant. I think it's been absolutely brilliant, and we've seen that with the way that mares have come through and won the Champion Hurdle in numbers like they haven't done so before. I think it's important to keep it, but at the festival, for me, the Cheltenham Festival should be about champions and not diluting it by sex, for example. And removing them from the festival, I think it would make a better Champion Hurdle. It'd make a better Supreme Novices Hurdle. And I think that's what they've got to look at. But they won't do that.
No, well, we're sticking with 28, aren't we? So we're going to replace them with something, and we're going to end up with handicaps.
You know, by sticking with 28, all you're doing is swapping this for that. And I don't think we had a situation last year where you're looking at thinking, well, there's certain horses that aren't running at the festival because they don't have an opportunity. So all you ended up doing is just shuffling the pack around a bit. So I think by saying that they're sticking to 28 races, as well intentioned as it is, I just can't see it achieving what they're hoping to.
Billy, final thoughts on the Cheltenham Festival schedule? I know it's going to be a few weeks or months away, isn't it, by the time they announce what's coming? But Ed Chamberlin there just said beforehand that whatever they do, it's going to be popular. I would beg to differ.
Yeah, I don't know, Matt. And again, if they're sticking with the 28 races, I don't see what they can do. It's you're shuffling the deck chairs in the Titanic here, really, aren't you? If that's all they're going to be doing. There is certainly a little bit they could thin out. I think there are a couple of races that the likes of the National Hunt Chase has become an uncompetitive contest. I think that could be on the chopping block, but I don't see, if you're just going to change them and make certain races handicaps and, you know, put more handicaps into the festival, I don't think that's the right way to go either. I think GC had a good point a couple of weeks back when we discussed it about the Mayor's Hurdle in particular, where, you know, make it a grade 2 instead of a grade 1. And if you want to run a grade 1 winner in it, then she has to be penalised. Something like that. They can tinker with those things. But I think unless they're willing to actually cut a few races from the festival, as Scoop said, like a couple of the mayor's races or whatever, then I don't think it's going to change a whole pile.
Okay, that is just about all we've got time for today. Thank you to Ben Linfoot, to Billy Nash, David Johnson and Ed, who just had 1 or 2 Wi-Fi issues at the end there, I believe. But that was a detailed look back over the week, and we'll be doing the same again next week. And we'll also be previewing probably the final couple of days of the Punchestown Festival, as well as the Kipco Guineas Festival at Newmarket as well. But for now, it's goodbye from me, Matt Brocklebank, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Download the Sporting Life app for the best racing coverage, including live racing blogs, fast results, stable tours, trainer and jockey interviews, expert opinion and tips.